Hello and welcome to this edition of Back in History. In this edition, we take you back in time to the story of how Olusegun Obasanjo, former military head of state of Nigeria and former civilian president of Nigeria, escaped being injected with poison while serving his prison term during the military administration of General Sani Abacha. Sani Abacha took over the reins of power in Nigeria on 17th November 1993 and became the 10th head of state of Nigeria. He was the mastermind of the coup that removed Ernest Shonekon from power. The coup was however bloodless as no life was lost in it. Abacha was himself a master coup planner and executor, having participated successfully in the removal of other heads of states. He seems to have deployed his wealth of knowledge in coup planning and execution to remove Shonekon in broad daylight without the firing of a single bullet. Having taken over the reins of power from Shonekon, Abacha began his administration of the affairs of Nigeria in earnest. He had zero tolerance to opposition and had no love for dissenting voices. He was a maximum ruler, and anyone who dared to oppose him, whether openly or clandestinely, was arrested and locked up. Obasanjo was one of the unfortunate persons to be arrested on the orders of General Sani Abacha. Obasanjo had gone round the country to hold meetings with opinion leaders on the way forward for Nigeria, and Abacha did not take it lightly with him. Abacha saw Obasanjo's action as a direct threat to his continued stay in office as military head of state of Nigeria. Obasanjo was thus charged, along with others, for treason and taken before a military court-martial. He was sentenced to death by the court, but Abacha later changed the sentence to life imprisonment following the intervention of several persons and members of the international community. It was a reduced sentence, but the weight on Obasanjo, a retired general and a former military president of Nigeria, was enormous and difficult to come to terms with. But he had no option than to serve his prison term. Abacha later died precisely on 8 June 1998. He died in office and was buried the same day in line with the dictates of the Islamic faith, of which Abacha was a devout adherent. Abacha was immediately succeeded by General Abdul Salami Abubakar. One of the first things that Abubakar did was the release of persons who were detained by Abacha. Obasanjo was one of the persons that was released, and by stroke of luck, Obasanjo was a person who emerged as a candidate of the People's Democratic Party, and when the general election was conducted, he won the election and was sworn in as the civilian president of Nigeria. In essence, General Abdul Salami Abubakar handed over the reins of power to Olusegun Obasanjo, the man that was detained by Abacha. Upon serving out his tenure, Obasanjo sat back and recounted the story of his life in his book titled My Watch. One of the accounts he gave in the book is the account of how he escaped being injected with poison twice while serving his prison term. Obasanjo was detained in two prisons, namely the Jos prison and later in the Yola prison. While in the Jos prison, several very important persons thronged into the facility to visit him in solidarity for what he was going through. Information got to Abacha, who then ordered his transfer to Yola. At page 441 of volume 1 of his book, My Watch, Obasanjo narrates how he escaped the first attempt to inject him with a poisonous substance which would have caused his death. He started thus, in quote, "The magnitude of the flow of visitors to me in Jos prison had caused some anxiety to Abacha. One day, I was suddenly told that I was being moved. Where to and for what reason, nobody told me. The movement of prisoners is always shrouded in secrecy for security reasons, as they would say. By early afternoon, I was moved to a government quarters in the GRA. There, a man whom I later realized was a medical doctor was waiting for me. He started talking to me about the concern of the government authority for my health, especially for my cholesterol levels, and said he would want to take my blood for testing. I knew very well that I had no cholesterol problem. I was slightly diabetic, and surprisingly my sugar level had been consistently normal. I told the man firmly that I did not need a blood cholesterol test and that the minor medical problem I had was diabetes. I checked my blood sugar level regularly and I was quite satisfied with my results. Obviously, he did not expect the reaction he got from me. He had to put his syringe and needle back and said to me that later they would follow up in my new location. He did not look happy, but there was not much else he could do with me at that juncture. As I came to realize later, Shehu Musa Yaradua went through the same process during which he must have been injected with what eventually killed him. I could only attribute the stand I took to the will and guidance of God. I had no premonition or tip-off. End of quote. Obasanjo then continued, still in quote, "With the doctor unable to perform his lethal act of injecting me with a deadly virus or slow poison, I was taken to the airport where an Air Force Dornier aircraft was waiting to take me to my new prison location. But exactly where I did not know. As I watched the shadow that the aircraft cast as we moved along, I knew we were moving in some easterly direction. We arrived in the evening and I was kept in the aircraft for 2 hours while they were preparing my cell in the new location. I was handcuffed for the entire journey. By the time I came into what turned out to be the Yola prison and my home for the next 3 years or so, it was almost 10 at night." Obasanjo's second encounter with a doctor who came to take his blood sample for medical examination was in the Yola prison. Obasanjo narrated this encounter at page 443 as follows, in quote, "Yola prison had no fairly modern clinic like Jos. The first item on my agenda was to see a doctor so that my medical condition could be put in correct perspective. I asked the prison superintendent for permission to see a doctor. The general practitioner, who also was the officer in charge of Yola General Hospital, was invited to see me. After listening to my medical history, he assured me that they had an internal medicine specialist, a physician who would be sent to see me. The specialist came and introduced himself as Dr. Ajuwon. I said to him, "That sounds like a Yoruba name." He went on to say that he was a Yoruba man from Okeogun in Ogun State. He had studied at the University of Ibadan and specialized as a physician. He was a Christian of the Baptist denomination, and he had heard of me both as a Nigerian leader and as a fellow Baptist. Naturally, he made me relax in his company. I told him my medical history, showing my drugs and the medical papers in my possession. I told him the story of the man who wanted to take my blood in Jos to check my cholesterol levels, as he told me. Dr. Ajuwon listened patiently and examined me as a doctor normally does for temperature and pressure. He confirmed the continuation of my drugs, exercise, and diet. We agreed that I should immediately send for him if any doctor, medical personnel, or group from Abuja or anywhere else wanted to see me or examine me. Obasanjo then continued, still in quote, "A few weeks later, a doctor whom I later discovered to be Dr. Yakasai came from Abuja wanting to take my blood for a cholesterol check. He came with his syringe and needle. I insisted he would not touch me until my doctor was around. The prison authorities sent for Dr. Ajuwon. When he came, he asked the Abuja doctor what he wanted. Of course, he gave the same story. Ajuwon, who had his own syringe and needle, there and then, and in the full gaze of everyone, including the prison officials, took my blood and gave it to the Abuja man. Ajuwon asked him when he would have the results sent to us. The man replied, within 48 hours of my getting to Abuja. End of quote. Obasanjo went on to say, still in quote, I remained in Yola for at least another 2 years after that visit, and no blood test result was ever sent to Dr. Ajuwon or to me. Obviously, he came for a devilish act, but God intervened once again. It was not too long after that visit that we received the news of Shehu Yaradua's death. Rumor had it that he was poisoned. The way I was taken to a government quarters with a man ostensibly wanting to take my blood for cholesterol check was the same way Shehu was taken, and under the guise of a blood check, a slow poison or virus was injected into his body. It must be mentioned that when I did not die as expected, Dr. Yakasai was accused of gross neglect of duty amounting to a coup, and he was sentenced to prison. He spent his prison term in Kuje prison. End of quote. Shehu Musa Yar'Adua was the elder brother to Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, who later became civilian president of Nigeria after Olusegun Obasanjo. Shehu was a thoroughbred military officer who served Nigeria for several years and later retired from the military. He was Obasanjo's deputy head of state when Obasanjo served as military head of state of Nigeria following the assassination of General Murtala Muhammad. The death of Shehu Musa Yar'Adua was a shocker to many. Obasanjo's story is indeed the story of a man who was saved by the intervention of the divine. He came close to death on the 2 occasions. He would have been injected with a poisonous substance which would have consumed him slowly and daily till his death. He was saved by the divine until this day, more than 25 years after. Olusegun Obasanjo is still alive. Thanks for watching this edition of Back in History, and do remember to follow the page or subscribe to the channel for regular notification on every new video. I remain your friend and host Ekemi Udim, wishing you the best of time in all your endeavors as you continue to journey with me across the history of Africa and of the world.